Hello, I'm Paula Caligiuri. Welcome to this rather hot edition of Breakfast at the Barracks. Today we have an esteemed panel of experts who will be talking about their work in the area of female sexuality. My first guest is Dr. Beverly Whipple. Dr. Whipple is Professor Emerita with the College of Nursing. She's a certified sexuality educator, sexuality counselor, and sex researcher. She's the co-author of several books, including the international bestseller, The G-Spot, and other discoveries about human sexuality. Our next panelist is Dr. Barry Komisaruk. Dr. Komisaruk is a behavioral neuroscientist and a professor in the Department of Psychology. He is co-author with Beverly Whipple on several books, including The Science of Orgasm and The Orgasm Answer Guide. And our third panelist is Dr. Helen Fisher. Dr. Fisher is a research professor at the Center for Human Evolutionary Studies in the Department of Anthropology. She's also the author of several books, including Why Him, Why Her? How to Find and Keep Lasting Love. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is just so much fun to have you all here talking about your research.
Thank you.
So I actually want to start there and hear about your research findings. Beverly, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think for the past 40 years, my whole focus has been on validating women's experiences that women have and they were told, no, that can't be, such as my work with the finding, rediscovering, and naming the G-spot or the Grafenberg spot, female ejaculation, women who have orgasm from imagery, just thinking, no touching their body, women with complete spinal cord injury and their sexual responses. So I have tried over the past 40 years to validate women's experiences and help them to learn and feel better about themselves.
Fabulous. It's fascinating, fascinating work. And how would you tell us about your research?
Well, I think we've evolved three distinctly different brain systems for mating and reproduction. One is the sex drive that Barry and Beverly studied. The second is romantic love, that elation, giddiness, euphoria of early intense love. And the third brain system is attachment, that sense of calm and security you can feel for a long-term partner. And in my early days, I was studying attachment. And then I'm probably best known for the fact that we've now put almost 100 people into the brain scanner studying romantic love. Romantic love, when you've just fallen madly in love and you're happily in love, people who've just been rejected in love, and actually I put some Rutgers students in who had just been rejected in love. And the third, and also we've now put people into the brain scanner who report that they're still in love, not just loving, but in love with their partner after an average of 21 years of marriage, people in their 50s. And we've proven that you can remain in love with your partner long term. So that's the basic research, and now I'm moving into the biology of personality and why you fall in love with one person rather than another.
Oh, that's fascinating. We'll definitely need to talk more about that one as well. And Barry, how about you? Highlights from your research?
Well, I'm interested in how the brain is involved in orgasm. It's one of the most compelling behavior patterns in humans, and we know virtually nothing about it. So through the work that Beverly and I were doing, we were actually the first to show where in the brain orgasm occurs. Now we're looking at mapping where in the brain genital stimulation projects to in women and in men. And we're actually the first to show where the clitoris, vagina, and cervix project to in the sensory cortex. And now we're analyzing how that activity proceeds to the parts of the brain that are active during orgasm. What's the sequence of activation? And in the course of these studies, we've also looked at women with spinal cord injury and identified a unique pathway, the vagus nerve, that was not previously thought to carry sensation from the genital system. And we see that it carries it from, the vagus nerve carries sensation from the vagina and cervix outside the spinal cord. So women with complete transection or cutting of the spinal cord, if it's completely severed, they can still feel vaginal and cervical stimulation via this bypass pathway.
And that's fascinating. So I'm curious to both of you in your research, how have you found that these breakthroughs have helped women intensify orgasm?
I don't know about intensify orgasms, but it's helped women to feel so much better about their responses, such as Barry was saying, the women with complete spinal cord injury. I wrote back in the 80s, that women report that they have sexual response and orgasm. And they've been told, no, it can't be. You have no feeling, you have no sensation. You can't be experiencing this. And yet they did. So they came into our lab and we measured what happened with self-stimulation. And indeed, they did have the same physiological parameters as people without spinal cord injury during their orgasmic experience. So all you were doing is saying, hey, what you're saying is true, and let's believe you, and let's get that message out to the medical community so they're not saying to these women, it's impossible, it can't be. And then looking into what's happening with the brain. So I think that that's one thing that has helped a lot of women.
Actually, when we studied those women, it was a very dramatic moments in the laboratory, because they were told that they can't have any sexual response, and suddenly they had never tried. And they tried vaginal self-stimulation, and they said they could feel it. And this was many women burst out crying, and it was a very moving experience.
To those who had not tried, and then others who said, yes, I do, and they've been told, no, that's not so. If it is, it's a phantom. It's not real. So that's just one example of how our research has helped women.
Right.
Also, talking about the different qualities of orgasm, we in our studies of mapping the clitoris, the vagina, and cervix in the sensory regions of the brain, sensory cortex, we see that each has a different projection zone. It's like a cluster of grapes. The clitoris, the vagina, and cervix each have a different cluster of regions of activation in the sensory cortex. Actually, that's in figure number 2, and showing the overlap, or the cluster and the overlap. And the interesting thing about that is that under different conditions, we see that women can have orgasms from clitoral stimulation only, or vaginal stimulation only, or cervical stimulation only. And if they're combined, as Beverly has shown, that vaginal plus clitoral stimulation can produce a qualitatively different type of orgasm. And actually, by combining all 3 different projections, stimulating these 3 different regions, the orgasms are described as more intense, more complex. We're activating more, by combining the 3 different regions, we're getting more and more brain regions activated concurrently, and that produces a stronger and more complex orgasm.
Interesting.
But I want to get more to Helen's work and how ours ties in.
I do
because there's
also.
something that really ties in terms of my belief, and that is I believe women are pleasure-oriented, not goal-oriented. And I want to help women not to go focusing for that orgasm or focusing for finding the G-spot or experiencing female ejaculation, but to feel good about what brings them pleasure, what brings them love. Now, my husband and I have been married to each other for almost 50 years. I've got a couple more months to go. But I can really speak to a lot of what you're saying about love, and I think it's important.
Yeah, you know, that's our most recent experiment, is we put people in their 50s and 60s into the brain scanner, and they all maintained they were still madly in love with their partner after an average, as I say, of 21 years of marriage. And we didn't know what we were going to find in the brain, because, you know, all the textbooks say that this dies out. And sure enough, we found the same activity in a tiny little factory near the base of the brain, the ventral tegmental area, in the same cells that actually produce dopamine and send dopamine to many brain regions, giving you that feeling of elation, giddiness, euphoria, motivation, focus on your partner. And so you can really, you got to pick the right person. But
it doesn't necessarily have to involve orgasm, and that's the point I'm getting at.
Because they're different brain systems.
Absolutely. And let's feel good about the pleasure that we have, and not be so focused on the orgasm itself.
And
it doesn't have to be activated, but it happens that that same system, the ventral tegmentum to the nucleus accumbens, is a dopamine projection system, and we see that very powerfully activated during orgasm.
And that's why I think, that's why when you fall in love with somebody, suddenly they're enormously sexually attractive to you. I mean, 3 weeks ago it was just a nice guy in the gym, or somebody in your French class, and suddenly everything about him, the way he gets on the bus is sexy. Everything about him is sexy because you've fallen in love with him. It can be the reverse too. I mean, casual sex actually I don't think is that casual. I mean, unless you're so drunk you can't remember it. You know, a lot of the sex response can actually, I mean, and I might be, this is what I've read, tell me if I'm wrong, with any kind of sexual stimulation, you're driving up the dopamine system in the brain and can help you push you over that threshold into falling in love with the person. So
better sex, better love? No.
Yeah, well, I think the romantic love evolved to enable you to focus your mating energy on a particular individual and start the mating process. It's quite logical that these two would go together.
I don't know if it's better sex, better love. Maybe it's better love, better sex.
Okay.
But
I think that's true.
Let's hope it's that direction.
It also doesn't have to involve the genitals per se. You can have sensual and sexual pleasure and be in love with stimulation of different parts of your body or just mentally. Yeah. And so I think it's really important that we give people permission to enjoy what they enjoy and to feel good about whatever that is that brings them pleasure, as long as they're not exploiting another person. And I think what Helen is saying is substantiating that.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I think that I think all three of these brain systems evolve to work in all kinds of complex systems. I mean, the sex drive evolved to get you out there even looking for a whole range of partners. I mean, you can feel the sex drive when you're driving along in your car. It doesn't necessarily have to do with any particular object. Romantic love is focused on one individual. And then I think that evolved to trigger the sex drive, but also that third brain system evolved to enable you to stick with that person for a period of time. And in a good relationship, of course, in America, we want all three. We want to feel the sexual impulses in that in any way, just not just orgasmic. We want to feel at least that romantic love coming and going throughout the relationship. And no matter how you feel about the person, you want to feel that deep sense of attachment. And the brain is very well built for all three of those brain systems.
So this is primarily about female sexuality and love on the part of the women, but I'm just curious, differences between men and women?
I've only conducted one study with a male, so I can't speak to that. And we're just beginning to do some studies now.
Actually, our work and other people in the group in Holland, it looks like the difference in the similarities of brain regions activated during orgasm are much greater than the differences between men and women. The similarities, all the same regions, and many different regions of the brain are activated during orgasm. That's one of the very interesting findings. That
and
basically
is it true for love as well?
Romantic
love as well.
We didn't find any gender differences in that intense feeling of romantic love between men and women or between gays or straights.
Interesting. Fascinating.
And it's also interesting that so many brain regions, so many brain systems are activated during orgasm, during romantic love. Basically all the brain systems are activated.
And what also is interesting is women who experience orgasm from imagery alone, no one touching her body, including the women themselves, we get very similar activation also. So I think it's not only our feelings are involved, physical stimulation is involved, but there's so much in terms of our sensual and our sexual pleasures that we have to learn more about.
We sure do.
I was very skeptical about the women reporting that they could have orgasms just by thinking.
Right.
And so we did a study in which we had 10 women who said they could have orgasms just by thinking alone, and we also had them do genital self-stimulation. We compared all their autonomic measures, blood pressure, heart rate, pupil diameter, and even pain thresholds, and we found that basically when they said they had orgasms by thinking alone, we got about doubling in all the measures, equivalent to when they induced orgasms by genital self-stimulation.
And this was in a counterbalanced way.
They told us what,
so
I asked them
not
what they were
affect the
thinking
other.
about.
This is wonderful.
Counterbalanced, but so one did not affect the other. And I think that's important too in this study.
And this will be a wonderful place to pick up when we come back. We'll be back in a minute.